Welcome to Sisters in Crime Australia and Murder Mondays, when we ask authors about their crime craft. I'm Karina Kilmore. I'm a debut crime writer, a journalist and a national convener for Sisters in Crime, and we've been celebrating women's crime since 1991. Before I introduce Kerry McGinnis, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Kerry, you have been writing since you were about 9 years old, and that was also about the start of a very unconventional life. At age 12, you took up droving with your father and your 4 brothers and sisters. You've worked as a shepherd, a droving hand, gardener, stock camp and station cook on your family property Bowthorn, northwest of Mount Isa. You've also written 2 volumes of memoir, Pieces of Blue and Heart Country, and you now have 8 best-selling crime and mystery novels under your belt, all set in Australia's outback or tropics. Sisters in Crime was delighted to have you speak at its Small Towns, Big Secrets Criminal Interventions event in 2018, and it is a great pleasure to have you with us again today. Welcome, Kerry, all the way from Bundaberg. But before we get to the questions, can you please give us your elevator pitch for your latest novel, Croc Country?
Oh, thank you, Karina. It's nice of you to have me. Croc Country is a novel about loss and grief and new beginnings. It has a female protagonist, as do most of my, not all, but most of my books. And it's just about turning somebody's life upside down and then making things really hard for them and seeing what they do with it, how they manage, because in life, in anything, the only way on is through, so you just have to keep plodding. And my young woman, Tilly, was a wife and mother, a homeowner, and happy in her marriage, and she lost the lot in an unfortunate tragedy on a boat one day coming in. And she has to do the best she can, because she's homeless, husbandless, childless, and as you can imagine, heartbroken. So she picks herself up and continues to try and make a new life in a wildlife sanctuary in the top end of the Northern Territory on the western side of the Gulf country. So it's really still Gulf country, I suppose.
Yep.
And she's just settling down to do this when she discovers or suspects or has reason to believe that perhaps her husband isn't dead after all, and that perhaps everything is not, that she has believed is not what it actually is.
Well, no more spoilers, please.
Yes. So that's what it's all about, and how she gets through to the other side.
Fabulous. Oh, I'm looking forward to that. That's great. Okay, let's get to our questions. I'll just give them a shuffle, see where we land, and here we go with the first one. Why is crime so appealing as a genre?
Well, I think crime in my books are always secondary. I'm mostly concerned about the family, because they're nearly all family stories, even if they don't exactly have a family, they want a family. I'm mostly concerned about the family relationships and interplay, and crime is just a means to carry the plot to carry the main story, which is about the people.
Yep,
so,
right.
Yeah.
What started you on a life of crime writing, or writing actually?
Probably all the wicked things I saw during my years in the bush. Don't think it's all, a peaceful country haven out there. It ain't, especially cattle country. So You hear things, you see things, you know things. And I thought, why not use them?
Yeah, fabulous. How many drafts do you write before handing in a manuscript?
Oh, it'd be hard to say, really, because what I tend to do is I write today and then tomorrow I come along and destroy it and rewrite. And then the next day I do the same thing. But, you know, the first day I'll destroy all 3 pages. The first time I'll destroy all 3 pages. The second time I will leave a page and destroy, you know. So it goes like that. So, I mean, I'm really redrafting all the time I'm doing it. But once it's finished, I will do at least 3 more rewrites before I send it off.
Okay.
But I mean, if you were to add it all up, it's probably about 20.
Oh, surely not.
Well, if you keep doing, you know, destroying every day and rewriting, it must.
Yeah. Oh, that's tough love, isn't it? How much of a profile do you do for each character before you write?
Not a great deal. I usually have them in my head, but because it's, you know, you get breaks between writing. There are days when you can't get there and things come up that make you lose the track a bit. So I mostly jot down brief notations of what they look like, what their attributes are, what their habits are, but without going into a very deep thing, because I've got them in my head and I can see them there and just draw them out when I need them.
Great. What's your top writing tip and what's your top self-editing tip?
I suppose that as far as writing goes, every day, if you can manage it. I have met during my life a number of people who say, oh, one day I'm going to write a book. And unless they're about 14, you think this is never going to happen, because if they were going to write anything, they would already be writing. And, you know, people that tell you that in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, you think, no, you're not. You're just going to talk about writing this book. When I get time, when the kids are grown up, when I finish this job, if you're really fair dinkum, you'd be doing it at night after the kids are in bed and when you come home from work and things like that. As for editing, I suppose, just keep it simple. Every time you're betrayed into high-flown language, think, I could say that more simply and do it.
Fabulous. How important is place in your writing?
Oh, very important, yes. I always choose my locality before I choose my characters, because the country, the outback, is probably the largest character in my book, and everything depends upon it, looking at it from a bush point of view, because you can't do anything in the bush unless the weather allows you to. You know, the roads are not sealed, the rivers are not bridged. I'm not necessarily talking about 2020 bush. I'm talking about when I was there back in the 90s, when I left it back in the 90s. So I tend to set my stories back between the 60s and the 90s, because that's when I knew the country best. And if I were to try and write about it now as it is, I would probably get things wrong, because there have been such huge advances in travel and transport and that type of thing, and even in the digital technology that we didn't have when I was there.
Yeah. How do you write about violence?
Oh, I don't know. You just imagine it and do it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't think I write terribly violent novels. There's not much explicit violence in them, or the occasional fist fight, but I mean, you can see that in any stock camp at any time, and it's generally more a matter of a grudge or high spirits than sort of, I'm going to kill this guy dead.
Yeah.
Unless they're very drunk, of course, and then they're quite hopeless anyway, so it's fairly harmless. But I wouldn't say that I really go into for a lot of explicit violence in my work.
Yeah. How much of you is in any of your characters?
Probably a little bit of every character has something of their author in it, because you have to judge how they would react, or, you know, in any given situation. And some of that surely must come from thinking, what would I do if this happened or that happened? I mean, if somebody was trying to lure me into a darkened room in a creepy house, I would run away screaming. But I mean, you can't, if you're going to take the story forward, you can't do that with your character. She has to go in there.
Yeah.
You know, there must be a little bit of everything, even in your your own tastes and your likes and dislikes when you're sort of describing clothes, perhaps, or deciding what they might have for dinner. There's got to be something about what you would like, or what immediately springs to mind is probably what you would like or you would cook for yourself.
Yeah.
So I guess there's that.
What research did you do for your latest novel?
I went to have a look at the country because I had never actually been over the border into the Northern Territory at that stage. I know the territory further down, but I'd never actually been up there. And I took a coach trip from Cairns to Darwin just so I could examine the bit of country that I was writing about that we passed through. Yeah. And it was much as I had imagined it, but it's always good to get a look at it and see what sort of grasses grow, how the trees look, how the country changes, where it's forest, where it's scrub, where it's rubbish country. And then it gives that veracity to the story.
Yeah, fabulous. What's the scariest thing in one of your novels?
Oh, I don't know that any of them are particularly scary. Well, that's a hard one. Well, that's not a novel. I was going to say probably the scariest thing was being lost, but that was in an autobiography that happened to me, in one of my autobiographies, so that's not a novel.
Yeah, well, tell us about that, Kerry.
Well, when I was, I don't know, 13 maybe or something, we had a wagonette and a team of horses and flock of goats, and we were travelling through the desert country and the territory, and we got caught in a very bad sandstorm to the point where the sand blew so much that it wiped out all the tracks, wiped out the roads, wiped out everything. Not that there were roads, but there were tracks,
Yeah.
And it also sort of sent our horses crazy, and they all cleared out. And we knew where the water behind us was. We didn't know where the water ahead of us was. We couldn't move without the horses. So my father and I went looking for them. We had 2 horses left that had been tied up, and we went looking for them. And in the process, we managed to lose one of the horses because he bolted out of the bridle while I was putting it on him, and he just ripped away and knocked me over.
Oh, my goodness.
So there was just my father and his horse. And he left me half the water and told me to sit under a tree until he came back.
Oh.
He was gone for the best part of the day. And I had absolutely no idea how to get back to the camp or if he would ever catch up with the horses. And if he would be able to find me when he came back. So that was very scary. But of course he did, because he was a great bushman.
Yeah.
And it all ended well, but it just goes to show how extremely careful you have to be. Because he was a seasoned bushman, and still it happened to him. So, it was a very dangerous situation, but fortunately it came out okay.
It's very scary.
Yeah, I've never used that sort of thing in one of my novels. So, as I say, I don't think they're particularly scary.
Well, your true life was scarier in that case. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I do plot to the extent that I know the beginning and I know the end. I frequently don't know the middle, but by the time I get there, I've generally worked it out. I don't worry about not knowing the middle. I tell myself I'll think of something, and I always do.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
A bit of both.
Who's your favourite crime fiction character?
Probably Peter Temple's guy. I forget what they call him now. They've made, he's been on TV and films, but I've got all his books and I really like Peter Temple. Yeah, it's so very Australian, particularly in the loquacity of his language. No, that's not the word I want. It's the brevity of his language, because you just sort of sometimes stop and go back and say, what did he say? Because it's only 2 words, but you get the sense of it,
It's a nice sparse way of writing, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it's pretty unusual, but it is very, very Australian.
Yeah. What is your writing routine?
Oh, I write every day. Usually get out to the computer by 8:30, 9:00. And as long as I get 2 or 3 pages done, I'm quite happy. If I'm really on a roll and I get more done, well, that's great. But as long as I get 2 or 3 done, that's okay. It's moving it forward. So I write every day except Sunday.
And that's 2 or 3 new pages, Kerry. That's not going back.
Yes, that's the new pages, and that's not the ones I've trashed.
Yeah. What's the best way to dig yourself out of a bad plot hole?
Oh, you just have to scrap it and think that's not going to work and go back to the point.
Tough love.
That bit and do it there. Yes, it's no good going on because you know it's weak. It's not going to hang together. So it's better to cut it out before you get any further because it's harder to do it afterwards.
Yes. Do you start, or you've partly answered this already, do you start with plot or character or something else?
Well, I start with the country and then I start with the protagonist.
Okay.
And at one stage, I don't know why, I must have been reading something or watching something, and I saw this girl with glorious red hair, and I thought, right, got to have a redhead. That was out of Alice, yes. So I had the girl even before I knew it was going to be in the desert somewhere, but I had the girl that time even before I had the location.
Wow, yeah, okay. What's the hardest part about writing a novel?
I suppose it's probably keeping going because it really is hard work. People think, oh, you just sit there and scribble all day, but actually it's just as hard as digging ditches in its own way. And I often think of that as, you know, well, I better get in there and hew another 100 yards of the keep going. But once you've got it down once, after that, it's nice because you've got the story there and then you can just fiddle with it and change it and alter things around. Yeah. And I really enjoy the rewriting part of it, but it's the first time that's the hard thing, And
we're up to our last question for today, Kerry. How would you get away with murder?
Oh, I've never considered murdering anybody. But if I did, and if it was in the bush, and supposing I was a big, strong man, I mean, I couldn't lift a calf, let alone a full-grown man to get rid of him, supposing I wanted to, I would probably dig a very big post hole, a strainer post. That's the big flat post that you have at a quarter of a mile. And I'd put him under that, but it would take a huge amount of work because if your strainer post is 5 foot, say, and then it's got 2 feet in the ground, that's 7 feet, and then enough room to get a man's body in the bottom of that, it wouldn't be worth it. But I mean, it would be a good way of getting rid of him because nobody is ever going to dig up the strainer post.
No.
But apart from that, I really don't know.
That sounds like a great idea to me, under the strainer post. Kerry, thank you for being with us today on Murder Mondays. It was lovely to see you.
Thank you.